And the fear that I explore at the end of the chapter is that now we're beginning to create rituals, new rituals, public rituals, that have the ritualistic elements of traditional religion, but without any of the forgiveness or redemption. So, for example, we now have a liturgy of public contrition or penance. It's very much like the traditional Virgin, where you go before God and you say, I have greatly sinned, I've offended God, and I ask His forgiveness. Except you do it to a kind of Twitter public, where you have committed a kind of thought crime, and you go in front of your followers and you say, I'm very sorry for having used the wrong word in whatever context, and I'm going to learn from my experience. I'm in touch with communities, blah blah blah. This kind of PC ritual of repentance and confession, except there's no forgiveness. Traditional religion had the element of repentance, but it came with mercy, it came with redemption. The secularized has the same elements of confession, but with none of the redemption, none of the mercy, none of the love that was encoded and handed down in the traditional version of something like an act of contrition or confession.
Well, and this has been interesting, this movement that's come out of critical theory, exemplified in critical race theory. Some people call it wokeness. There's a number of people, John McWhorter comes to mind, that see it as a kind of secular religion. I think he says it's exactly a religion. I don't know. I myself wouldn't see it that way, but it seems to have some of these types of elements, like the ritual.
Yeah, it has liturgies, and some I would argue kind of what's the right word? Bastardized or kind of distorted elements of theology. So, for example, there's an element of original sin in critical race theory, except the original sin is not universally distributed like the kind of Christian theology would, where all of us are marked by this original transgression of our first ancestors in the Garden of Eden, and we were somehow wounded by it, and therefore that affects how we live in our current lives. It's certain people are marked by this, depending on your race, and because they believe in intersectionality, whether or not, depending on who you're interacting with, you might carry the original sin or not. So, like, with respect to an African American person, an Asian person would be marked by original sin, because Asians are seen as like a white adjacent. But then with respect to a white person, that Asian person is guilt-free because it's the white person who's like the ultimate oppressor, or between sexes and so forth. It's a very kind of malignant way of looking at people. That the original theology, I think, is true. In fact, G.K. Chesterton said, original sin is the one kind of aspect of divine revelation for which we have daily proof. You see the fall every day, that somehow there's something wrong with human beings across all generations, across all peoples. There are things about us that trouble us, and those mirror the fall and therefore original sin. But this kind of politicized version of it picks and chooses who gets to be blamed for these kind of racial sins and gender ones and so forth. And there's no it's all situational, it's all relative. Depending on who you are in a given context, you're blamed or you're not blamed. And so I think I do agree with McWhorter that it's pseudo-religion. But what I would say, I think because I've read some of his work, I think he seems to see all religion as kind of superstitious, backward in this sense. And so wokeness is just another one. What I would say is that actually true traditional religions have a much sounder account of what it means to be fully human and why we need a God and so forth, than these distortions of them, like wokeness, like critical race theory.
So you've just watched a clip from an American thought leader's interview, and as you probably know, I pour my heart and soul into these. YouTube has been censoring some entirely mainstream videos lately, including things like Florida Governor DeSantis's coronavirus roundtable. We've even had some of our own videos removed from YouTube for no clear reason whatsoever. And frankly, I don't find this to be appropriate. I don't find this to be acceptable. I don't want to be sitting around thinking what YouTube may or may not feel like they want to censor. And beyond that even, YouTube has demonetized us for the past 2 months. Ostensibly, we're working to resolve the issue, but our hopes are kind of fading when it comes to this. So what is our response to this? Well, we've started our own platform, Epoch TV. Now, Epoch TV is the premium Epoch Times video platform. It's got American thought leaders, but it also has The Larry Elder Show and Crossroads with Joshua Phillip and a number of other programs. So you can get Epoch TV for this low introductory rate of $4.99 a month. And in so doing, you're actually supporting the Epoch Times as an organization. You're supporting uncensored news. You're supporting groundbreaking investigative reporting. And you're supporting these deep dive interviews that I love doing so much. Please join us.